Hello everyone, welcome to the session on climate action in practice, how data, AI and advocacy are reshaping policy. So my name is Alexis Laffittan, I'm Partnership Manager in the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, where we also empower countries in anticipating climate risk and also meeting their sustainability commitments. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be in this session, your moderator, because it's a very practical session. Like in the Paris Peace Forum, you will see a lot of policy debates, and this one is also about concrete actions and real projects. You have seen probably on the ground floor, like the Space for Solutions. So we are pleased to have like three experts with us who are also part of like the projects community of the Paris Peace Forum. So this session in particular will focus on how data and tech can be enablers for smarter climate and environmental decisions. And we will explore how cutting-edge tools from ocean mapping with Steve, mineral traceability with Svetlana, and data-driven policy simulation with Crystal can accelerate climate solution and enhance accountability across sectors. So in 1 hour, we'll try to dive into 3 or 4 main themes. So the first one is turning data into impact, in particular how technological innovation and data can drive concrete policy outcomes. The second one is on how technological innovation can also be useful for resource management. And the third one is how, with Crystal in particular, how we can bridge technology and advocacy, ensuring that the technical data translates into actionable advocacy and meaningful policy impact. So let me introduce like the 3 speakers that we have with us today. So maybe I'll start with Steve. So Stephen Hall is the head of partnership for the Nippon Foundation JEPCO Seabed 2030 project. Seabed 2030 project is an international effort to support the creation of the first high-resolution map of the ocean floor. Steve is an experienced ocean science, technology, and policy consultant. He was previously the vice chair of the UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and former CEO of the Society for Underwater Technology. Then we have Svetlana. Svetlana Kranga is the CEO of Natixa, who runs the Deep Trace project. Deep Trace is a platform that integrates blockchain, AI, and satellite monitoring to deliver real-time carbon intelligence, mineral traceability, and resilient supply chain. She has over 15 years of experience in industrial innovation and sustainability, and she was previously a French foreign trade advisor and president of AFNOR, like a certification agency, the Commission on Minerals and Materials Specialty. Then we have Crystal, and full disclosure, I'm also a mentor to this project. We are pleased to have them on the panel. Crystal Noiseau is a senior associate director of the MIT Climate Pathway Project from the MIT Climate Policy Center in the Sloan School of Management. She is trained as a formal science educator, and the MIT Climate Pathway Project uses interactive simulations to advance the adoption of evidence-based climate policy. Prior to MIT, Crystal worked in environmental affairs for state government and also in the Harvard University Office for Sustainability. So maybe I'll start with Svetlana first. So Svetlana, can you tell us a bit more about the Deep Trace project that you're presenting this year in the Paris Peace Forum?
It works?
Should work. Yeah.
Should work. Thank you, Alex. It's a very interesting project, Deep Trace. It was born from frustration, saying that we humans, we are very capable, intelligent, having different technologies. For example, we have satellites to observe planets. We have sensors to monitor our equipment to achieve excellence in terms of operations. We have people trained to make reports, ESG reports. So why we don't have something common like a platform or something putting everything together and giving us a great view, a general view of what's going on in the mining, because we are working a lot of the sustainable mining. So from here we saw that deep tracing the minerals could be a good project to move the things to have the things moving forward very quickly in a very efficient way. So we created a platform using different technologies like satellite monitoring, as Alexis mentioned already, real-time carbon accounting, and also blockchain, to put everything on the blockchain in order to make proofs. So in order to give to the governments the possibility to have a general view of what's going on, how it could be done better, and for industrials to make them more accountant. I mean, more to have a real reputation in terms of what is it, because as we know, mining is very much criticized because of the environmental issues. So we said that if we have this kind of platform, this can be helpful not only for the governments but also for industrial to provide proofs that they are doing things in the right way. So Deep Trace, it's about traceability and mining.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Steve, Seabed 2030 aims to produce the first ever map of the entire ocean floor. You started explaining to me a few minutes ago. Can you explain to the room?
Indeed, Seabed 2030 in some ways is extremely focused and very simple. We simply want to create the first ever global map of the ocean floor. As many of you will know, we have better maps of the surface of the Moon and Mars than we do of our own world, and we've been at work with our predecessors since 1903 to try and create the first global map. By 2016 we had 6% done. Our project came online with funding from the Nippon Foundation of Japan in 2016, and since that point we've managed to get from 6% to 27.3%. It's slow but steady progress, but even 1% of the ocean is about 4 million square kilometers. That's larger than the land area of the European Union or larger than the land area of the Indian subcontinent. And we're managing that pretty much every year. So it's slow, it's steady, and it relies on data donations. We're reasonably well funded, but not funded to do the mapping ourselves. We have to rely on the goodwill of industry partners, academic partners, government partners, to donate subsets of their data so that we can complete that first global map.
Thank you, Steve. Crystal, yesterday I participated in a fascinating workshop at Sciences Po of the MIT Climate Project. But can you present it yourself?
Is it on? Oh, there it is. So the MIT Climate Pathways Project is a collaborative project between the MIT Climate Policy Center, MIT Sloan's Sustainability Initiative, Sloan is MIT's management school, and a nonprofit called Climate Interactive, which was born out of MIT, co-funded, and executive director is an MIT alum. And we are leveraging interactive simulations to advance the adoption of evidence-based climate policy among leaders in both the public and the private sector. So why are we using simulation? An analogy we like to use is pilots learning to fly. So we fully expect that a pilot is going to spend countless hours in a simulator honing their skills before they're ever going to actually take to the skies with precious cargo. And we don't see policy as that much different. Policymakers, policy influencers are making these huge decisions that are impacting us all, and we feel it's very important to create a safe environment for them to test out their ideas first in a simulated environment before they are signing the bills or signing something in the boardroom if they're leaders in the private sector. Why interactive simulation? To quote our senior scientist on this project, Professor John Sturman, it's because research shows that showing people research doesn't work. If we are just having one-way communication and we're coming in with our slide deck and we're telling these leaders what they should do, we do not find this to be as impactful if we really give them a chance to roll up their sleeves and test out their own ideas and learn for themselves in a really, really hands-on way. So we do this using two simulators, C-Roads and N-Roads. That's the names of the simulators. C-Roads is our first simulator that we use that you can explore the difference between emissions reduction pledges and pledges around deforestation reduction and afforestation, massive tree planting, across countries and blocks of countries. And then there's En-ROADS, which you saw yesterday. En-ROADS is a global model that allows you to test dozens and dozens of climate policies, anything from pricing carbon to electrifying transportation to improving agricultural practices. And you can see how those interventions in the system would play out in the world and impact things like air quality and sea level rise and deaths from extreme heat and crop yield and dozens and dozens of factors. These are co-developed with Climate Interactive using the best available science. And to date, we've been able to run sessions like we did yesterday with over 465,000 people in 181 countries, including 22,000 leaders in government, business, and civil society to date.
Impressive impact. Let's turn back to Svetlana. Svetlana, you mentioned that DeepTrace focuses on satellite traceability for minerals. Can you explain a bit more how can transparent data systems influence corporate accountability and policy enforcement? In particular, you mentioned like resource extractions, what is submitted to a lot of new regulations. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. Let's start from the beginning, I would say. Today we are talking about data, and data. But what does it mean, data? Why everyone wants to have this data? Why it's so important for us, for the governments, for businesses, for people to have the data? It's very simple, because data is information, and information is power. What does it mean? For example, if you are an industrial company, data, it means your suppliers, your product, your everything, your investment, your strategy. If you are the government of one country, the data will provide you the information about what's going on in the country. And this is not only information, it's also proof. It means that factually you can take some decisions taking into account this information. And what we observed in DeepTrace, that more information you have, better you have a chance to take the right decision. And what we are pushing for, and what is important, even in a very difficult or complex, I would say, geopolitical situation today, having data, having information will give you the possibility to take the decision instead of your competitors, to deal better, to sign better partnerships, and especially to create a vision and a strategic vision. So how it works on the ground. We collect this data automatically. It depends if it's satellite, for example, it will be the imagery and the algorithm analyzing this imagery, saying that, for example, here you can find some illegal mining or whatever. if it's industrial company, we collect this data, we analyze, we have like calculators of CO2, whatever it's required. And why it's necessary, as Alexis already mentioned, it's very important because in Europe we have legislation like, for example, digital product passport that will be in place soon, battery passport, where we need to know exactly the origin of the mineral coming into the batteries. We have also CBAM, carbon adjustment mechanism at the border. And for example, if you are importer in Europe, you need to prove what is the CO2 of the steel, aluminium, cement, wherever you are importing. So this data will be, let's say, the essence of the future trade and will impact the policies of other countries. Because, for example, if today there are some countries dealing with in Europe, say, for example, selling, I don't know, steel, whatever is a product or mineral, if there are some barriers, maybe they will try to find some other markets. So when we are talking about the policy, we need to take into account all the whole elements. And we putting on the blockchain. Why? Because it's important not to make only promises, but also to provide proofs. And for us, the blockchain, it's a proof. It means we gather the data, we put this on the blockchain, and you have a real factual proof. In this case, for the governments, for example, this will give them the power, but we hope it will not be political power, but an ethical one. So if I can conclude, I would say that the data is important, the analysis is important, and what is also very impactful is the policies and the decision that can be made from this information and from this data, especially in the countries where mining is core of the economy. It's a flow of business, of not only business, but also of the conflicts. So to take the right decision in the right moment, it's very important. So with the blockchain, with the collection of the data, with the analysis, it will shape a better, we hope it will shape a better future.
Thanks, Svetlana. You emphasized a lot like the relevance of data, like for policymaking. Steve, why is it useful to have like a complete map of the ocean's floor, and notably to advance the, let's say, the UN Sustainable Development Goals? I see, some use cases for, protection of biodiversity or coastal resilience. But can you explain why, why is the what's the objective of the seabed project?
In some ways, it's similar to what Svetlana was just saying. It's about you cannot manage what you haven't measured. And the vast majority of humans around this planet live within just 60 kilometers of the coast. We're a very coastal species. 71% of the planet covered in ocean. We know the ocean is getting warmer. It's absorbed the vast majority of the extra heat and carbon dioxide that's been pumped into the system since the industrial age. A warmer ocean is a more energetic ocean, so you expect to see bigger storms like the one that's been impacting Jamaica just this week.
Exactly.
And with the storms come storm surges, risks of inundation, risks of flooding, and having better seabed maps helps us plan responses to all of those things. Because, for example, a tsunami pathway is affected by the shape of the seabed off the coast of that island. A storm surge is affected by the shape of the seabed. Naturally, things like offshore resources, you might be putting in for oil and gas exploration or for offshore wind farms, marine minerals, aggregates, all of these things. You need to know what's there. You need to know the shape of the seabed. And also, when you're trying to produce digital twins and models, having a detailed knowledge of the shape of the seafloor has a very, very fundamental impact on how the models work. Do they actually have the currents going to the right place? at the right time, at the right speed. And it all turns out to be affected by the shapes of the hills and valleys down below. When industrialists back in the 19th century first started laying telegraph cables across oceans, they didn't even know there were mid-ocean mountain ranges down there, and had some incredibly expensive errors when they go and drape a cable across a mountain not knowing there was a valley in between it. And they'd have to go out literally with a hook and line to try and find the end of the cable and stick it back together. And we don't want to get back into that world today. So we like to have good seabed maps. We like to know what's down there. We keep having surprises. Every year something new is discovered, new reef systems, especially seamounts. So there's a lot going on down there, and it's about filling in those fundamental gaps in human knowledge, particularly for these large ocean states. I don't like that term small island developing states that gets used. It's terrible. Call them big ocean states. They're bosses, or large ocean states, because these might be small places with a small human population, but they have vast marine territory, and they need to know what's down there.
No, fascinating. And just like a follow-up on your last point, so like not on SIDS, but on large ocean states. Like, in particular, because they need like information also, like, you know, with sea level rising and so on. Like, how can your efforts can support their blue economy planning also, like, in terms of data, evidence, and support the project?
Yeah, it's absolutely fundamental. Many nations are now attempting to implement marine spatial planning systems from its earliest stages. Even the most advanced economies have only been doing this for a few years. So there's still lots to learn. And some of the emerging nations are at the real forefront of pioneering how to better plan what's happening in their marine space. We're learning off them. So there are people you might think, oh, what is this small island here? What do they know about marine spatial planning? And they turn out to have a really good map that they've commissioned. They know exactly what's there, where the hills, the valleys, the good fishing grounds are, the seagrass meadows. And once they have that information, they can zone activities. They can make sure they're not destroying fragile ecosystems while still being able to generate some wealth from their blue economy in the areas where it's more appropriate to do that. So it's a real mix. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. And we're learning all the time. It's a steep learning curve, and organizations like PPF have an important part in that as well, in giving people the tools and the skills and the training they need to look after their own resources.
No, exactly. Thanks. Let's turn back to Crystal. Yesterday, I've experienced like the simulator, and I don't remember exactly how many indicators you have or policy levers. Like, can you explain a bit more how you turn complex climate models in a way that resonates for policymakers and the general public? Like,
yeah, so even though our project is very laser focused on getting this tool in front of these high level decision makers in government and business and civil society, that's really a small part of the overall reach that this tool has had in the world. And so one of the powerful things about it is that it's the same tool being used to, say, educate the constituents of the member of Congress as it is the member of Congress, or the employees of the Fortune 500 company as it is the CEO. They can be exposed to this same tool. And we have teachers that use this in middle school and secondary school, and then we use it in the halls of Congress. And so one of the ways that we do that is to ensure that it is very accessible. First and foremost, anyone can use this and access this right now. You can run it on a regular laptop or tablet. Just open up a browser and access the tool.
you want to give a URL?
Yeah, en-roads.org will get you there. And the best way to see it would be to come visit us in the SCUP gallery, and we'll show you the tool firsthand. It is lightning fast, so it's really important that it can give people feedback immediately. They don't have to ask questions of a modeling team and then have the modeling team go model and then get back to them in a few weeks or months. It operates, you can get feedback in 60 milliseconds using 21,000 equations for projections over 110 years, like that. So it's really, really fast and useful in that sense. The interface, you've seen the interface. It's a very simple interface, and it's designed to make something that would otherwise be intimidating feel accessible. So if we said we're going to run this systems dynamic computer model, people might be very turned off by that. But when they see the interface and they realize that they can actually use it themselves, this is really helpful. And we have two different levels at which we can use it. So you can land on the simulator and you can just stay on that main screen and never really move from it. And that's, you know, what teachers might do in secondary school. Or you can really drill in and you can do deep dives into the policy levels, and you can get really specific about what you're trying to test, and you can change the outputs, and you can see the outputs across hundreds and hundreds of different, you know, graphs and graphics and such. So it can be as simple or as complex as needed for the given audience. There's no gatekeeping, so we always do say it's best to first experience it with a trained facilitator. It's just helpful to see it once, but you don't need to. You can just go on, and maybe in 10 or 15 minutes of playing around with it, you'll be able to draw some insights, even at just the level of the general public. And it is used worldwide because it is literally translated. It's translated into 21 different languages, all done by volunteers that take that whole complex system and allow you to run it in different languages. We provide training materials. We provide a user guide for teachers or professors. We provide curriculum, everything that they need to use this with students. But I would say the sort of crown jewel of how we're able to really get this broad reach from everyone, from these students up through leaders in high-level government, is that we have an ambassador program. So we have nearly 1,000 trained ambassadors around the world, and the program to be trained to use this tool and facilitate workshops with it is freely available online. You can do it asynchronously on your own time. You can also say, if you learn better in a cohort, you can meet other people around the world that are interested in using this tool and train alongside them. And that's really the reason why we've been able to get it in 181 countries. So all of those things really help to make it accessible and useful for a variety of audiences.
Thanks for explaining how to turn complex into accessible. That's really useful. Svetlana, talking about that, what are the main barriers to integrating traceability data into regulatory and corporate decision-making processes? Because now that you have the data, but how do you ensure that this data is actually used or influence the policy-making of the regulation process?
I agree with you, Alexis. We have data. The problem with the data is that it is fragmented. We have a lot of data available more or less everywhere, but how to put this in one system, because the system needs to have a data which have the same frame, I would say. So it's like, if I can take the example of Philippe, you are in the middle of the ocean and you have just a candle and you don't know where to go because there are too much information. So the fragmented data is one barrier. The second barrier could be the stakeholder engagement, because in order to make, for example, the traceability of the mineral, we have different stakeholders. It could be the mine itself, the logistic company, the refinery, government, and even the end user. So how to put all them together and to convince to participate, to provide the data, to convince them what is the advantage to share the data, because from one side we have the data, and from another side, companies, and not only companies, they do not want to share because it's commercial secret, and they do not want to expose themselves. So this is also one of the tricky question, I would say. Another point is the blockchain. What we need is interoperability, and unfortunately today we have different systems, and we don't have something which is unique or can be interoperable in a very easy way. These are like the most important barriers. Of course, the perfect world does not exist, but I would say what is important here is to understand the advantage of having the data, to have some maybe policies imposing in the beginning, and after once they have the advantages, it will be like not how to say, in a very pushing way. The industry will be willing by themselves to share the data, because it's all about trust. Right? If we trust the system, it can work. For example, like a dollar, right? Dollar today is not gold, but we trust the system. The data sharing is the same. If we trust the system, we can overcome all these barriers. So it's difficult, but it's feasible if we can all together find the right way to trust the system.
No, you mentioned trust as a keyword. Steve, I think you're facing some of the same challenges, like in collecting data, or you mentioned that you're not the project is not gathering data by itself, but it works also with partners. But what incentives or benefits can motivate governments or private companies to share their ocean mapping data? And how do you, through the Seabed 2030 project, how do you align this interest towards, collective climate action or collective public good?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, Alexis. And first of all, we're very fortunate that we happen to be in the midst of the UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development, which has given that top-down push intergovernmental level to encourage member states, to encourage their industry to abandon the sea blindness, which is often the case. We're terrestrial animals. We tend to stand on the shore and look inland, and sometimes we have to stand on the shore and look out to sea. And that applies to companies as well, and their shareholders, the stockholders, the management. So we do have an issue where we have to persuade private sector donors in particular the value of sharing data. This is potentially very valuable data. A company's not going to go out there, spend millions of dollars on a survey, and then just give it away for free, saying, yeah, go do whatever you want with it. So we've developed a good system over the years. Essentially, if surveys are carried out within a nation's exclusive economic zone, the first 200 miles or so, it's pretty straightforward. National authorities usually insist that developers have to share their data. It goes to the National Hydrographic Agency, and from there it gets put into the international pool of data. And it can be a condition of licensing as well. Suppose you want to build a wind farm, and the government might say to you, great, but first of all you have to map the site, and you have to upload a copy of that into a public place. So in national waters, that first 200 miles, straightforward. When you get into the Wild West, beyond the 200, you're pretty much into a space where the primary actors are private. It tends not to be governments. Once you go beyond 200, you're into private industry, and then you're having to work with them to say, for the benefit of humankind, for the benefit of all, are you willing to share a subset of your data? And one of the first things we say to them is we understand that the data belongs to the client. So you might be a big offshore survey company like Fugro or Guardline. They don't own the data. The data belongs to whoever paid them to do the survey. So they can give us the transit data when they're between the point where they left the port and when they start doing the survey, but the the high resolution survey belongs to client. So that's when we speak to client. We go direct to client and say, hey, we're Seabed 2030. We understand that you've just been conducting a high resolution survey of this particular area. We don't want your 1 square meter super duper commercial accuracy survey, but can you give us a subset of it, perhaps with a 100 meter box? And we aim, when we talk about fully mapped global ocean, we say at least one real world measurement in an area the size of a football field. And that is what we'll consider to be a fully mapped ocean. And once you speak to the company, you form those relationships and say, look, we only want that. We don't want the bit that shows where all the internet cables are. In fact, that can actually be dangerous to publish where they all are, as we'll know from the news. So we'll take a subset of the data, and once people understand that, we've had a very good response rate of private sector coming back to us saying, yeah, as part of our responsibility as good corporate citizens, we will share you that data. And of course, they can put that in their annual reports. They can tell their shareholders and interested parties. And generally, it's pretty good. We get a very high acceptance rate when we put in these requests.
And you mentioned like some of the work of the UN also, like back in June there was like the UN Ocean Conference in Nice, like with a recent adoption also of the High Seas Treaty, like the BBNJ. Did this give like political momentum also? Like
it does. It helps us a lot. And just a few hundred meters down the road from here at the UNESCO building, you have the UN Ocean Decade office, and one of the groups hosted out of that is called the Corporate Data Group. And one of the really important pieces of work that our friends at UNESCO have been doing is working through particularly the big multinational companies, the BPs, the Chevrons, the Alcatels, people like that, and saying to them, look, you know, how about sharing some of the data? And again, getting good result. And because they're able to fly it under this UN Ocean Decade flag, and that conference in Nice was really, really helpful for that, we're getting good results. But there are still big gaps, very big gaps, particularly Southern Hemisphere, deep, open ocean. That's where the gaps tend to be.
No, very good. Talking about data again, Crystal, there's a saying that say that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And like, how do you ensure that your models, like in the MIT Climate Pathways project, are using relevant and data and remain useful for policymakers and climate leaders?
Yeah, it's so important for us to find ways to build confidence in the model for our target audiences to feel like this tool can remain useful for them. So one of the first ways we do this is to just start with the best available science using data sources like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the International Energy Agency, International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN, the World Bank, the latest and greatest peer-reviewed science. So we have to start from a place of using the best available science, and we have to keep that updated regularly so that the model is updated every month or two, and you as a user can track and see all of those updates, how the data itself has been updated, but then also how has the model itself been updated for improved modeling and improved user features. So for example, over time, we will hear policymakers ask us for maybe more detailed or more nuanced ways to test policies. And so being able to update the model to allow for that and to take something that was maybe simplified where, for example, previously in the model, a decision maker could go in and they could test what it would look like if they encouraged or discouraged the use of bioenergy. And over time, you hear decision makers say, well, not all types of bioenergy are the same. And I really want to be able to test the difference between bioenergy that comes from wood versus agricultural crops or versus waste. And so we add these new features as well and just keep that model updated. So that's super important. Another thing that is important is that we fully document this model. So the entire structure of the model, all of its equations, its parameters, its assumptions, they're there for you to explore. All of the scientific studies that we are basing this work on are there cited for you. to see. And I think the most useful and most powerful thing, in my opinion, and it's pretty unique among models, is we have a way for you to challenge and change our key assumptions right in the model. So I'll give you a couple examples. If we're working with a scientist or a policymaker, and we have to make an assumption about how much will the world warm for every doubling of cumulative carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. There is a range in the scientific literature. We have to make an assumption. It's in the middle of the road. We can show them this. And if they disagree with this, maybe they are more optimistic, maybe they are more pessimistic, they get to actually change that within the realm of what the literature says. And so they can actually start from a different baseline scenario than when they land on the simulator. Another example would be economic damage from climate impacts. So we have to make an assumption of how the world's economy would suffer from things like wildfires and droughts and floods and pests and disease and natural disasters. So we can show, this is the scientific literature from this one economist, and this is the damage function we use, but you can choose the work of other economists, or if you're an economist, you can actually create your own damage function and start from that point. One more example might be a policymaker that's interested in planting 1 trillion trees, or this 1 trillion trees campaign. And so we have to allow them to maximize the planting of trees on the amount of land that would be required to do that. And so when you land in the simulator, our baseline assumption is there's not that much land, but there is a range that's accepted in the scientific literature. And so you can go in and you can change the amount of land that's available. This is so helpful. It's very disarming in a very good way to welcome people to challenge and not put up a brick wall and say, great question. Let's dive in. Let's explore that. Let's start from a point that you're more comfortable with. And this is so helpful where people who would maybe otherwise might be confrontational about talking about this subject, it puts them at ease, and they're just more open to using this to explore their policy ideas. The last thing I'll say that's really important is to test the model against historic data and then other future projections. So we start our model in 1990, play it forward to the end of the century. That means we have 35 years of data that we can say, what did our model say was going to happen to the marginal cost of solar electricity, and what actually happened? And can we, is it right, spot on, and we can say good job, or is there something that we can learn from and improve the modeling? And then we go ahead and do the same thing with all of the other large integrated assessment models. We feed the same input in our model into their model. We play them out to the end of the century, and we want to make sure that our model is no more different from the mean than any of them, or no more different from each of them than they are from each other. And we do all that statistical testing, and we publish that for people to explore and scrutinize. So all of those things are added up to really build the confidence that you need to make sure that people feel that the model is useful.
Good. I think we have a bit of time, so maybe before we turn to the room for questions, and I see already a few, like you'll get like the first one. I want to take a step back also, like in terms of data ownership and geopolitics, like in the era of artificial intelligence also, where data is also data sets are concentrated in the US, Europe, China, and so on. Like MIT based in the US and so on. You're funded by the Nippon Foundation, if I'm not mistaken. How do you ensure also that the tools or the models that you developed are co-developed and inclusive, and support also like the needs of the countries in the global south who may not have access to also this entire set of information, data, or compute capacity and so on? Any one of you want to? Svetlana, not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, indeed. We come back to the trust. And we come back again how we gain this trust. I would say that cyber is something that is very important. And for example, for us, we test our tool with cyber companies. So it means that they put different scenarios and they test, saying if we have failed somewhere or not. So this is the way how we test our tool and the data. Of course, nothing is perfect. It's all about risk also. We need to evaluate the risk. And today we are talking a lot about the data management system. It means how we can, what is a strategy? Maybe not to put everything in one database. Maybe we need to spread the data in different databases. So yeah, this is a way. It's as I said, it's not, we can't say here that it's 100% sure. There are always something that could happen. It's life. But to do everything possible to manage the risk, this is something that we are focused a lot on.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add? Steve?
Yeah, I'll just add that the general bathymetric chart of the oceans, the chart that we're creating, it is distributed, it's stored at different data centers around the world, and it's free of charge for people to use. We also put quite a lot of effort into training people so that they know how to use the data, they know how to serve it, they know how to analyze it, and there is a international fellowship program every year through the general bathymetric charts, also funded by Nippon, that helps train people up so that they know how to use the maps in the first place. But we always make it clear to everybody that if you're donating data to Seabed 2030, it is for free use. Basically, it's open source data once it's out there. So.
And I would add that in addition to welcoming people to criticize the data that we have, we also want them to criticize the data that we don't have, what's missing. And so we're always looking for where there is existing data that maybe we just don't know about and fill that gap. Or is it really not there, and that maybe we can, for example, at MIT, do research to try to fill these data gaps and work with other academics at other universities to try to fill these data gaps. I remember it was not too long ago that we were unable to have an output in En-ROADS that would show the additional deaths from extreme heat, from warming across every continent. We were missing Africa entirely. We just didn't have the global data set that we needed for this. But over time of using this with decision makers, we find out about data that we don't know about. We help to close these gaps, and then that kind of crowdsourcing helps to improve the model and make it more applicable to people around the world.
Good. I have some follow-up questions, but I see already like a couple of questions from the room. So I promised there's one here, one there, and one at the back also. So yeah, I think you're first. Like, just wait, like for the mic behind you. Yeah.
Hi, Svetlana. I'm pretty interested in Natixar's use of blockchain. You mentioned trust and interoperability. Out of personal interest, is it structured as a DAO? And then also, yeah, is it structured as a DAO, and which chain are you all using, just out of personal interest?
Which, sorry, what? I didn't get.
Is your tool, you mentioned the use of blockchain, is it structured as like a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization? And if so, also like which chain are you using?
Yes, we're using Ethereum.
Nice, okay, cool. Okay.
Thanks. I think there was one behind you, the microphone.
Hi, good morning. Chris Hagedorn, Sciences Po. Can I ask one question to each, very briefly?
Brief ones.
Crystal, I'm curious to know if in the area of agriculture and land use in particular, do you have an example at national level in the US where the model, useful or otherwise, has led to a specific policy change in the US? So that's one. Svetlana, does your modeling, traceability, blockchain, for an environmental disaster like that which took place in Zambia in February, is there any relevance to the work you're doing to prevent those types of disasters in Africa where the data is missing? And Stephen, I assume your modeling of the seabed floor is really geared to facilitating deep sea mining, which has its all major environmental risks because we won't be able to see the damage being done quite so easily. How do you address that? Thank you.
Very good question. So now, up to you.
Sure. So I don't know if I have an example of a change so much as how the tool can be used to ground truth claims that are made by policymakers about the relative impact and effectiveness of different policies and strategies. And so we have recently really expanded the use of this tool with journalists and to teach them how to use the tool to ground truth these claims. So in the case of land use and land use change, this concept of we're just going to plant our way out of climate change. We can just plant 1 trillion trees, and that's going to take care of it, and that's going to be the silver bullet. This claim was made by a very high-profile person in the U.S. government, very publicly, and we worked with a journalist from the Washington Post to really do a deep dive into the simulator so that she really understood all of the assumptions, all of that, and was able to write a pretty extensive piece on why that claim is probably not grounded in the best available science. So they can certainly help change the conversation about these policies and their relatively effectiveness and help to hold policymakers accountable for the claims that they're making.
Definitely working with media and journalists is also critical. Svetlana.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Indeed, the disaster, especially in mining sector, it's something that we are focused on because we understood after taking into account different feedbacks from the companies, we understood that they really need to do the monitoring more or less in real time. So today we are developing this satellite module, which could be focused on one mining site, analyze the data, and to be able to say if there is a risk or not of the disaster. And this was required by one specific, for example, mining company, more for insurance side. So it's somehow starting develop this module. In the beginning was for the mining sector. Now it's more for insurance companies. And actually the governments started to look at. So yes, it's something that we are working on.
And Steve, on the risk side, with deep sea mining.
Well, deep sea mining, always a very controversial one. Now, first of all, our maps are not models. They're based on real world data, physical measurements, and where there isn't a physical depth measurement from sonar type systems, you're using satellite derived data, but it's all based on real measurements, not model data. The data is provided by the people who are out there mapping the seabed. None of the data that has been donated to Seabed 2030 yet has actually come from a mining company, though those people are not in the business of sharing their data. What we do have is data that's been provided by governments, other forms of industry, even the equipment manufacturers, the people who actually make the sonars will often donate subsets of their data. And that lower resolution map that we get, I mean, a 100-meter grid is not going to let anybody mine. It's not anything like high enough resolution to permit a mining activity to take place. But what it does give, especially for the majority of nations that want to have a moratorium on deep sea mining until we understand the environmental impacts, it does mean that a map is available it levels the playing field. If you're opposed to deep sea mining, by using the GEBCO map that we're providing, it gives you access to data that otherwise is only going to be available to a mining company. So to us, it's part of that democratizing access to ocean resources. It's not making seabed mining easier. It's giving everybody, including those who are opposed to it, the ability to say, well, we think this might be what's down there, judging by the shape that your maps are revealing. Also, our maps don't actually tell you what is the nature of the seabed. It's simply the contours. It's hills and valleys. It's not saying, by the way, that bit is coated in manganese nodules, although you could probably figure that out from backscatter. But it's a tool for everybody, is what I'd say. It's not making life easier for the bad guys if that's what they're perceived as being.
Thank you. There was two questions, one here and one lady in the back that was just before, and then just a second. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Nandegi Magdalene. I come from South Sudan, and while hearing about the importances of the data concerning on climate change, especially on mining, I come from one of the zones where there is mining, and there is a lot of conflict that happens. So I want to understand the intergenerational cooperation between the experts from various fields of mining operations that can contribute to global peace and prosperity, to mitigate the conflicts within our areas. Ideally, why I focus on this is that we have seen experts coming to Africa, and there is a concern that data is missing. And at the end of the day, we see the mining operations leave for us holes. They leave for us an environment that is polluted, that is affecting our health, especially with women. It affects their reproductive system, and we end up having issues. The maternal mortality is increased in Africa. So I want to understand exactly, if we are talking about the climate action in practice, we excavate and get the minerals from Africa, but at the end of the day, we leave pollution, we leave disaster, we leave flooding, and at the end of the day, we leave conflict, and the youth are lagging behind. So what is the intergenerational cooperation between the experts and the community and the people within Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe for Svetlana on, and maybe I take before for a time. Do you want to go with your questions? So maybe we can bundle it like.
Okay, this is also. My name is Ashton Stewart Carter. So I'm the executive chair at TDI Sustainability. I've been working in mining and forging partnerships with conservation groups for about 30 years, and I built many tools for sharing data between mining and policymakers. I guess this is more of a kind of hypothesis around kind of funding and engagement with the private sector. If we listen to the constraints now being put on NOAA and the withdrawing of funding from them and the considerable funding that NOAA put into ocean monitoring, and assuming that's going to go away, given that all other governments are constrained and the ISA has a tiny budget, my hypothesis or my forecast is the only way we're going to get funding to continue robust ocean monitoring is through the private sector, which ironically is going to be from the developers who are exploring and testing the possibility of extracting deep seabed minerals. So that's my hypothesis. So my kind of, now that leaves a whole lot of kind of problems around, they're gathering data to make the case for environmental impact assessments and to extract that information. So it's not quite the same data or analysed in the same way. There's data sovereignty problems. There's also actionable actions which come from that. But given that backdrop of the drying up of funding, I don't see any other option that we're going to have to find ways to collaborate and not just consider. And shouldn't the emphasis, therefore, be on driving those partnerships?
We have 2 minutes left, so yeah. That's it. Okay, so maybe one for Svetlana on local benefits also for communities and risk and benefits, and for Stephen Crystal on also data cooperation with the private sector. 2 minutes. So 1 minute each.
Yeah, just to make it clear why we are doing these tools, the main goal is transparency. Why it's important? Because how indeed we are in the mining. Mining today is associated with something dirty, right? So the idea is, if today we have technologies, we can do a better stuff. It means we can do not use, for example, the closed circle for water in order not to reject the dirty water in some rivers, wherever. We can improve improve operational excellence too. How this can impact directly the local communities is to use, I would say, collective intelligence. It means if something wrong, that this could be signed by the community to the local authorities, and local authorities should check if for example, the company extracting the minerals are complied or not with what is required. So on the term of collaboration, it's all about standards.
Thanks, Svetlana. Very important to emphasize transparency. Steve, Crystal, like 30 seconds, sorry.
Sure, I'll just be very, very quick. Yep, private partnerships with us, absolutely key. So I'll come and have a natter with you after the conversation, because we all need to work together to be able to complete that map.
And I guess I'll close with all models are wrong and all models have limitations. And so to address both questions, one of the limitations of our model is we don't have the ability yet to connect a policy scenario, particularly one that is really encouraging more renewable energy with the land required for mining and the water quality for mining and where that mining would need to be done. And so we are open to any partnership, public or private, to help us get that data and add it to the model.
Perfect to end with like a call for actions for partnership and more cross-sector partnerships. So I will end with that. We are running out of time. So thank you very much to all of you who attended the sessions and to our fantastic speakers. Thanks.